It is Friday, which means we are back with another episode of eXhuming the X-Files here on the Outpost Unknown YouTube channel. We are making our way through Season 2, and we're on the home stretch now. My name is Matthew. He is Jeremy.
Hey, everybody.
Tonight, Mulder and Scully will be looking into some voodoo performed by Haitian refugees with the episode Fresh Bones. Spoiler, no dogs or cats were eaten in this episode. Directed by Rob Bowman, written by Howard Gordon, Fresh Bones. Did you remember this one, Jeremy, from when you were here?
I did not, actually.
Okay.
I did not remember this episode at all.
I had vague memories of it, but nothing coherent. Like I remember the symbols like on the tree and stuff like that, but I didn't remember the story or the plot or anything like that. So last week we talked about Satanists. This week we're talking about voodoo. I don't know if these two episodes should have been back to back, but here we are. Tell us a little bit about Fresh Bones.
So it opens with a little baby crying, always my favorite way to start any episode of something. Mom wakes up in bed and says, "Oh, it's your turn." And there's nobody there to do anything about it. So she gets up out of bed because I believe her husband isn't there because he hears some chaos going on in the bathroom. She goes over and finds that her husband is just puking his fucking guts out. It's like, "Oh, you're still sick?" At that point, I'm like, wow, he was sick the night before, puking his guts out, and your first reaction by waking up in the middle of the night when the baby's crying is take your rocket vomiting ass to the kids' room and go deal with that baby? What? Wow. Completely
make
fucking
that baby
insensitive.
sick. Yeah.
But she doesn't care. She doesn't care about that kid. All she cares about was that he was mad that he's like, "I'm fucking throwing up in here and you're not doing anything about this baby." And she's very indignant about it. To the point where she goes to the breakfast table. She's sitting there with the kid. They both look like they're about to start crying. So she's been like spinning this kid up about, "Oh, daddy's fucking freaking out. Daddy's sick. Daddy's going to leave us." And all. And he comes out. He's just like dressing for work. He's putting on his military gear and stuff. And you see, he's under the weather very, very badly, but he doesn't want to go do anything about it. And his wife is just not being a team player.
I think it's implied that he has been acting strange for a while now.
Okay,
you're putting all of it on this poor woman here.
No, I want because I'm only presented with what I see, man. I don't see anything supernatural about a guy who's like shitting and puking at the same time, but still has to go to work, and his wife's like, "Go take care of that crying baby."
It's his turn, down. Jeremy. It's his turn.
Yeah, it's his turn. Take a turn. It's all right. So he starts eating breakfast, and in his mind, like from his perspective, you do see something completely different. Like he's eating his cereal, and it becomes maggots, which is horrible, and he starts just barfing in his lap again because he thinks he sees maggots. But from her perspective, she doesn't see the maggots. She just sees an angry guy who has to go to work, and he starts eating his breakfast and starts throwing up in his own lap. And then he freaks out and gets in his car, and she's like, "I don't care about any of this. Fuck you. I'm packing this kid up. I've had enough." But maybe I'm projecting. I've seen a lot of military relationships break up. Like it felt like about half of the people I knew that got married at least were divorced by the time my initial 4.5 years were up. So maybe I'm projecting. But anyway, he gets in the car. He's like, "I'm gonna fucking go to work." He's sweating his ass off. He's seeing shit. And eventually he just like drives off the road, into a tree.
He looks in the rearview mirror and his face is like falling off.
Yeah. It's that scene from fucking Poltergeist where the dude like starts peeling his face away. Yeah, it was pretty good. It was
the maggots reminded me of Lost Boys. Maggots, Michael, you're eating maggots.
And so he drives into a tree, and you just kind of, if you're a younger viewer, you guys are watching this for the first time, listening to this crap, just know that there was a time when we didn't do car safety extremely well, and running into a tree very well might have killed you.
Yep.
Nowadays, you can hit a tree pretty fucking hard, and your car may be mangled, but you're probably gonna come out, you know, all right, alive. But back then, it was a fucking death sentence. And so, cut to
The INS processing center. Now, okay, I will have to say there is a lot of inaccurate stuff about this
voodoo.
episode. Well, yeah, voodoo, but also in terms of the INS processing center and stuff. This is not like the military and INS were not the same thing. So you would not have the military literally like overseeing an INS processing center. That was not an accurate representation whatsoever.
Well, weren't these people? Wasn't this more of kind of an American shore Guantanamo Bay sort of thing? Because weren't they part of a war and all were arrested by this Warren
Well,
guy?
they but see that's the thing. They name drop that is an actual because INS was Immigration and Naturalization
Yeah, yeah.
Services. They're the people that issue green cards and visas and things of that nature. Well, along with the Department of State, they identify this thing as an INS processing center, but the whole thing is ran by the military. It's like X shows up later on in this to jump ahead, and he's like, "Hey, look, this whole thing's going to be off the books in 24 hours. Like, no one's even going to be allowed here. That this is not how INS operated. They did not have detention cells and all of that stuff. So, just the fact that they labeled it an INS processing center was grossly inaccurate. Is all I'm saying."
That's how it. That's how it really is
Oh God.
there. They go. What is it? He's looking. FBI would give me a moment. I'm reading a note, and I have such terrible fucking handwriting. I'm just so bad.
I've learned to start writing my show notes on my laptop. So I will watch the show and I just type as I go because I have the same problem. I have this horrible chicken
Ooh.
scratch and I can't read it, and so I'm like, I'm just going to
Mr.
type it in Google
Fancy
Docs.
with his mobile laptop
Yeah,
computer.
yeah.
Nice.
I have not magnetoed it yet.
Probably. Well, there is a lot more electromagnetic shielding in a laptop than there is in normal desktop computers, so that's probably saving it. Okay, so
They underestimate my power.
they the FBI or Mulder and Scully get called in because I'm still not sure why. But they drive their first investigative part is to drive out to the tree that the guy wrecked into so that Scully or Mulder could show Scully the painting on the back of the tree.
Yeah, like doesn't it? If I remember correctly, doesn't Scully not even understand why this is an X file? And
Yeah.
Mulder kind of drags her along. And then Mulder's like, "See, voodoo symbol on the
Yeah.
tree, X file."
But what were they out there for, Matt?
Well,
Like,
that's the thing. This is Isn't this the episode with Skinner, or is that the next one? Because there's one of these where Skinner.
no, that's the next.
Okay. So Skinner's the one that was okay. Yeah, you're right. Because I was like, one of these episodes, I watched them all back to back, where Skinner's like, "What the fuck? You're out there. You're not even allowed to be doing what you're doing." I think Mulder was just kind of investigating some voodoo stuff, and he had to drag Scully
I
along.
get it, but the cops, the people that were there involved in cleaning up the body, they would have taken photos and sent those photos to DC. You didn't have to be there using taxpayer money to go look at a fucking painting on a tree, right?
Mulder needed to talk to Colonel Sweaty Head to get the real scoop. You can't get that from a photograph.
Okay, all right. I was reminded of the opening scene from fucking what was it? True Detective, where they find that girl tied up and bound at that tree.
Yeah.
Only it was just a tree, and there was no reason for them to be out there.
Great show.
Great, fantastic season.
Yeah.
God, what?
They're in the INS process. Yeah, they're in the INS processing center, and there just happens to be a little kid running around. And Mulder buys a Lucky Charm from him
For
because he's trying to.
$5.
Yeah, he's trying to sell it to Scully, I think, at first, and then Scully's like, "No, kid, I'm not giving you any money for this." And then Mulder's like, "I'll give you $5. Uh, that Lucky Charm. It's gonna come in handy down the road."
It does. But this little exchange with the Lucky Charm thing is the first like actual voodoo thing that we get to see in this episode, and it's racist, like right off the bat. It they were in a detention center, and some little
Yes.
kid is like with this terrible accent. Hey, pretty lady, I'll give you, oh, no.
It's a problematic episode. Let's say this. It's very problematic in how it represents a lot of this stuff. It's
Uh,
whenever you're trying to take voodoo and you're a bunch of white creators and you're trying to make a thing about voodoo, you got to be very delicate with how some of this stuff is handled.
no, no,
And I think
no. Either go full Predator 2 or just fucking hang up your spurs.
the Jamaican voodoo posse man.
Hell yeah. Go all the way or just leave it on the table.
Oh, I fucking love Predator 2. A hot take. I think Predator 2 is better than the original Predator. Hot take.
Absolutely.
Hot
100%.
take.
Agree with you.
Leave a comment, folks. Do you agree with us? Predator 2 is superior to Predator.
You're wrong if you disagree, but all right. Whatever. So they need to go look at this soldier's corpse, and they go into the like they were visiting the sweaty warden, and he's in this room that's just wood studs everywhere and like plastic around the outside and a door barely bolted on. But they have a field morgue, like a fully stocked field morgue out there.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever.
Also, not something that would be at an INS processing center.
Morgue, probably not. And I'm absolutely certain this is another one of those scenes where they just somebody built something for a special effect that they didn't use for a previous episode and bitched and moaned about it until somebody put it in the episode, because they go to the morgue. They want to do this zombie thing because zombies, voodoo, obviously. So there's going to be a missing body that they come around to later. But why the dead dog when they pull back and do the reveal that nobody, a human at least, is not in there? Because the dead dog looked really good. It looked like a hyena corpse. And I'm like, you know what? This is a fucking special effect somebody else made and just didn't ever get used. So let's use it.
There's no real explanation in the episode as to why certain things are the way they are. It's just voodoo. That's how voodoo works, Jeremy. It could be anything. It's just random shit. That's voodoo.
Yeah, right. It felt racist. But anyway, they find out that there was a riot at this detention center and the ringleader was on isolation. Some dude named Pierre. And Mulder goes and talks to him.
Yeah.
And the guy was pretty good. Still kind of a racist caricature of stuff, but he was better than a kid was. And he immediately starts cooperating with everything Mulder has to say. Like, he hates the military. He hates his jailers. But this FBI white guy comes in and he's immediately answering every one of his questions, like fully cooperative. I thought that was weird.
Yeah.
Then,
Colonel Sweatyhead makes him. I think he says he's like a revolutionary in Haiti or something. And a lot of the prisoners in this, they say, kind of follow him. Although I don't think they specifically said everybody in here is like a revolutionary and took up arms against the U.S. Because they mention, or the colonel or something mentions that American soldiers were killed in Haiti or something, and it all comes back around. And we'll explain what I guess the military's role in this is. But like that little kid was running around. I mean, we'll get to the explanation of that little kid a little bit, but he wouldn't have been necessarily taking up arms in some weird thing. It's unclear why all these Haitian prisoners are there, because they have this guy kind of like sequestered from everybody. And again, problematic writing. It's not clear exactly who all these people are, why they're here, why they're not just being deported initially.
So they leave. They leave the prison behind. They're driving down the road, and then all of a sudden they're arguing, talking about something like very emphatically, and they don't notice that there's this soldier like stumbling on the road in front of them. And then Mulder does not sell the worst line of the episode. Scully, Scully, look out! It's so bad. She swerves off the road, but they find the dead guy. They find this guy that died, apparently wrecking into the tree, stumbling around and alive because, zombies and voodoo. They find that he has pufferfish venom, I guess, in his system, but not
Yeah, they
enough to
call it
kill him.
tetrodotoxin or something in his bloodstream. It makes you look like you're dead because it slows down your heart rate and whatnot.
And so they're like, all right, well, if this guy is alive, then this other soldier that had died a couple of weeks prior should probably be alive too. So they go out to the graveyard to see if, or if something about, the burial was weird. Found the body was dug up. And while they're sitting there, the little boy that had sold them the racist caricature of a little boy in or Haitian boy was digging like across the graveyard from them. Then the FBI were like, okay, well, we'll handle this. They go immediately like take the kid into custody because he has a bag full of frogs.
Probably the same ones from the last episode.
Did they just film that real quick, or was one of the cast members like walking around with a bag full of frogs until the next day when they started shooting?
I think these were
Hey,
probably filmed pretty close together, so I would not be surprised if they were the exact same ones from the last episode.
hey, boss, I still got this bag of frogs. You want to do something with them?
What can we use? Well, voodoo. Frogs and voodoo. That sounds right. I mean, it's voodoo.
Well, no, they try to loosely tie it in because they start saying, well, aren't toad venom basically the exact same thing as pufferfish venom? Yeah, maybe. They never bring that up again. Um, they start feeding this kid, and the kid's like telling him stuff, but not really. And
Yeah,
then they 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 see some guy like, or wait, they send the kid to the bathroom to wash his hands or something.
they did, and then Mulder's like, "Hey, somebody's following us," and then they confront whoever that is, and it's actually the private from earlier on in the episode who was in the room with Colonel Sweatyhead. And he's basically telling them like, "Hey, man, these Haitians want to go back to Haiti. I couldn't say anything this in front of my boss. They want to go back to Haiti, but the colonel's not letting them. So that little kid is evil, and he's killing all of us one by one. Don't trust." And they're like, "What are you talking about? Just a little kid." No, no, man, that kid is evil, and he's murdering all the military guys here. So just giving you a heads up.
And then the kid takes off for no reason. Like he wasn't listening in on the conversation. And they were treating him to lunch, and it was all amiable. Like the kid wanted to be there, catching a free lunch and hanging out. But he decides to bolt, and so they chase him. Um, the
I
only
hate
thing
chase scenes involving kids. I hate chase scenes involving children. You could immediately catch this kid. You could. I hate this. You got the upbeat music. It's like this is not something that I'm feeling anxious about at all. They should be able to catch this little kid running.
fairly easily. And Mulder chases him on foot. Scully chases him in the car. It is you may have hated the scene, but it is worth rewatching for one thing. Scully did her own stunt in this when she had to brake real hard in front of the car or in front of the kid. Like she's revving the engine. She ends up finding the kid, and there's a scene where the kid cuts across in front of her, and she horks on the brakes and stops the car really really hard. It is her, and you need to look through the windshield at Scully's face because she is not. It's a lot of concentration. It's a lot of fear. It's a lot of
Oh,
like,
she
oh my
thinks
god,
she's
if I
actually
fucking
going to hit the kid.
yeah. Look
Oh
at
wow.
look at her hard breaking face is not a face of comfort or something that they practiced a lot of.
All right, I will check that out.
Um. So what is it? Chester. Chester was his name, I think.
Yeah.
And he had no reason to run, but He did, and then he turned into a cat.
Because voodoo.
It's voodoo. And it was a kid. What's weird, didn't Mulder start petting the cat?
I think so.
He's like touching this little boy. Like, all right.
It's strange. This whole episode, I'll get to my thoughts on it at the end.
The next line, the next note I have after this is Warden glistening in the sun. And that was right when I sent you that message.
Yes. Because they go back and they talk to him.
Well, this episode has been kind of boring so far, and somebody's like, oh, you know what? Nobody's been sweating their fucking ass off lately, so we need to start turning up the heat. And then we get this scene where they go confront the warden, and he's sitting in his office, like, just starting to sweat.
They probably just had, like Diddy, hundreds of bottles of, like, oils for the sweat, and they just pull those things out and wipe down this guy's bald head, shine a backlight on him, and be like, yes, glisten, glisten.
But he tells everybody off, so Mulder goes all the way home for some reason while this warden cuts open the rarest ham ever. Like,
no, that's voodoo ham, Jeremy.
Voodoo ham.
You cut it, you open, then it starts bleeding profusely. It's voodoo ham.
Either Predator 2 or
King Willy One.
Mulder goes home to his home apartment, opens the door, and a 10 of diamonds comes tumbling out of somewhere. And apparently that is X's calling card to go meet him. And he goes and has a conversation with X for no reason.
It just seems so, random. And out of the blue, and I know there have been previous in the first season, I don't remember which episode it was, but there was a couple where Deep Throat just showed up for no real reason whatsoever. It's almost like, hey, remember this person? Like, don't forget about him. He's still around. X, he just shows up and says, hey, 24 hours.
I was expecting him to show up in, like, a subsequent episode, but he showed up here so that we as an audience, because Chris Carter thinks we're all fucking idiots, needed to remind the audience, like, this guy exists. So when he shows up in the next episode, I don't want you to have that that reaction like, oh, that guy. Okay.
Yeah.
But it did not happen, to the best of my knowledge.
And X is basically intimating to Mulder that the military is kind of sanctioning Colonel Sweatyhead to
arresting all these people,
and harming them potentially, because we learn later, but the colonel actually kills the revolutionary guy, and that this is basically the military saying, hey, they killed some of our guys, so we're going to allow you to kill some of their guys. Like, it's like a revenge thing.
Sort of, but it wasn't that the same scene where the warden started letting on that he knows voodoo or wants to know more about voodoo to become more powerful, and the Pierre guy wasn't cooperating with him, and that was like the real reason the warden had him.
And they find that really horribly early Photoshop photo of Beauvais and the colonel in there.
That was I used that exact same word. When visiting the wife, Mulder sees a bad Photoshop and leads to a huge conclusion. And he uses the line, when in Rome. So he sees a photo and all of a sudden just jumps to, oh, the warden's been doing voodoo because when in Rome, do some voodoo shit.
We forgot to mention that Scully is getting in her car with Mulder, and she cuts herself on a bunch of thorns, voodoo thorns, I'll call them. And my note is, why is nobody questioning how these items are being placed in all of these locations? Because that's one of the big things. It's like, okay, this is some sort of detention center, but Scully's car is not in the detention center. So how is there, like, this thorn? Like, it's not a crown of thorns. It's like I don't know, like a big bracelet of thorns or something wrapped around her steering wheel. How is this shit getting in there? No one brings up, well, that's weird.
No, all of this is happening. You've been saying it over and over and over again. So let me say it back to you. It's voodoo, and that's how voodoo works.
Okay, how silly of me. Yes, voodoo. It goes without saying. That's why Mulder and Scully aren't questioning it. Voodoo. Got it.
And then it was It was so stupid. The following scene, Boulder and Scully breaks into this facility and goes immediately to the warden's office to start investigating what really happened because this jump to conclusion bad Photoshop thing. And they pull out this piece of paper that was a complaint sheet that a couple of soldiers had filled out, like one of those formal you got to write down on a piece of paper and
Yeah.
hand it off to somebody in the chain of command that, hey, I don't agree with how we're treating these people. And he has these bad, like fake bloody chicken feet stabbed through the papers. And that's supposed to, like, I don't know that you're supposed to contextualize that as, oh, the warden was doing voodoo and they said that both of the complaints from both of the previous soldiers were on it. And that's why the first soldier died and the second soldier ran into a tree, is because he poked bloody chicken feet through a complaint sheet that was stuffed into a box. But voodoo.
Voodoo.
My next note is this is the third episode in a row where Scully is taken out of commission. Because of the
Yep.
thorn thing, she starts infecting her hand and she starts hallucinating this random black guy strangling her in the car.
Well, he comes out of her hand, like she's looking at her hand, and then suddenly, like, a hand comes out of the hand and just starts like choking her out in the car. The effect looked cool to me. I did kind of like that effect of like a hand coming out of a hand. I was like, oh well, that's weird and that's kind of unique. But yeah, you're right. The last 3 episodes, Scully has just been taken out of commission for a lot of this.
Mulder, in the meantime, is out in a graveyard running over to where Pierre was buried because he knows for some reason that the warden is digging him up. The warden was wearing a robe?
Voodoo robes, Jeremy.
Voodoo robe. Yeah, right. Okay, gotcha. He starts talking, or after doing a little bit of voodoo, he starts talking like one of the aliens from the original Stargate movie. It was such a cool voice. Didn't make any sense, but it sounded like him.
I thought he was channeling the demon from the last episode or something, or Satan. I was like, cause the robes, it was kind of red looking. I was like, are they doing a weird crossover here? But no, sadly no.
No, just voodoo. And then he gets attacked by Pierre, who wakes up in the coffin and is a zombie. Gets killed by the zombie guy. I had a weird note here. The whole time Scully is dealing with this guy strangling her in his car, I thought that she had touched the good luck bag and that's what scratched her in the first place. I must have looked away from the screen during the thorn scene.
Oh, really? Because she holds it up.
She grabs the bag and it's like, why? A little bit of the hair of the dog that bit you? How the fuck did this work out?
Yeah, no. There's like this big thing of thorns around her steering wheel, and she actually pulls it off the steering wheel and like holds it up to the camera.
No. I must have been sleeping.
Yeah. So, and that's another thing that bothered me about this, because when Colonel Sweatyhead dies, Scully walks right up to him. He's dead. She doesn't even like question that he's dead. She doesn't sit there and be like, well, actually, we just found out that the previous guy had tetrodotoxin in his bloodstream, made him look like he was dead. She just immediately says, he's dead, Mulder. He's dead. And then we see
she's a doctor. She knows.
She's smart, or smarter than that, because at the very end of the episode, he's not dead. He was buried alive. The guy just made him look like he was dead. He's in the coffin, like beating on it, because that's the big shock at the end. He was actually alive the whole time. It makes Scully look completely incompetent. If she couldn't tell that this guy is actually dead or not, it just I didn't like it.
She was just being strangled by a black guy in her car, and she grabbed a bag and made it go away.
I don't want to hear these excuses from you. This is bad writing. This is bad writing. I can't blame it all on voodoo.
It was no. This whole episode was because of voodoo. Like every great thing and every awful thing, mostly awful things that happened, was voodoo.
All right. Well, what are your thoughts on Fresh Bones?
I'm gonna leave it that vague. I'm just gonna say how I feel about it is voodoo.
I hated this episode. I absolutely
So bad.
hated it. I was sitting there watching it, and again, I had images of it from when I was a kid, but I guess I was expecting because I was so high off the last episode. Again, I watched the last four back to back to back to back. I was
Yeah.
like, oh man, and then this felt like such a letdown. I don't know if I would have hated it as much if it had been somewhere else in the season order, because it's not really connected to anything else. I don't think you needed the Satan one and the voodoo one back to back. You need to spread those things out a little bit, I think. So I think just the way I watched them kind of hurt it a bit. But yeah, I didn't like the representation of how a lot of this voodoo was done, and the way that they had some of these actors act. I
You
agree
did
with you.
not like INS representation either. Just want to make
No,
sure that
no,
you're clear.
things like that just bothers me. It's like that is so obviously wrong. No, that it. Oh, yeah, it's I'm okay with stuff that's sort of unbelievable and goes beyond, but it can't cross that threshold where it's like that's just so obviously wrong that it's going to bother me for the rest of this time. I thought, God, I don't really think there was much of anything I really liked about this episode, other than maybe like the special effect and of coming out of the hand and stuff like that. But no, this one was not for me. I can imagine Fresh Bones may be in my bottom five when we when we
Wow.
ultimately rank these. It may be. But some fun facts. Wade Davis is mentioned in this episode. He wrote The Serpent and the Rainbow based on his experiences in Haiti. That book inspired the film The Serpent and the Rainbow, with similarities to this episode. The Serpent and the Rainbow is actually a really interesting film directed by Wes Craven in the 80s. Why am I blanking on? Bill Pullman is the lead in that. Anyone who doesn't know who Bill Pullman is, he's the president in Independence Day, and he goes through a bunch of voodoo stuff down in Haiti. The shot of the highway Mulder and Scully are driving on in the beginning, labeled as County Road 10, Folkestone, North Carolina, is the same shot used in Aubrey 3 episodes earlier for the road labeled Highway 377 near the Missouri-Nebraska border. So there you go. That's an interesting tidbit. Fresh Bones was written by Howard Gordon after he read 2 magazine articles detailing a number of U.S. military personnel killing themselves while stationed in Haiti. The refugee plot was used due to the producers being unable to actually film in Haiti. Colonel Wharton was portrayed by Daniel Benzali, Colonel Sweatyhead. While the producers agreed that he did not look like a military man, quote unquote, they unanimously agree that he had the quality they were looking for in the role. So, Jeremy, you are a military man. Did he look like a military man to you?
No, he looked like a human fucking thumb, but there wasn't a lot about the military in this episode that made any sense. He was a colonel. Everybody that worked for him everywhere were privates. Like, I'm sorry, but there's no colonel like hanging around telling privates to do any fucking thing. There's like 12 fucking ranks of people between those two that pass shit all the way down that hill. So, you know what? I don't even want to fucking get it. Fuck it.
It's
It
it's
wasn't a good
almost
military.
it's almost like they didn't know what they were doing when they wrote the episode. Simply like just researching this kind of stuff would be enough to get these critiques kind of like off the table. If someone were to look at something like this, like the INS processing center thing, for me makes no fucking sense. Why would you even label something like that? Like, ugh, God, I digress. Production for this episode began in late December 1994 and was completed in January 95. The Haitian refugee camp was shot in a derelict building in a North Vancouver shipyard. While filming the graveyard scenes, sump pumps had to be used because the scenes were filmed during extremely rainy weather. To film the scene in which a man emerges from Scully's hand and strangles her, series makeup artist Tony Lindala explained, quote, "We had a mechanical hand and had a guy doubling the actor's hand stuff his fingers up through it. There was gelatin skin on the hands, which I thought played very well and was believable and fleshy. The hand double had tubes attached to his fingers, so as he pushed up, it tore it open a little bit, and you see the plasma in the skin rips. They played that so well in the final cut," unquote. So, and that's about it. That's about all the information I could glean from this episode. There's not even a big Wikipedia article on this one. Fresh Bones. I have nothing else to say about this. You have anything you wanted to add?
Voodoo. No, no, nothing to say.
All right. So thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of Exhuming the X-Files. Next week, we're going to go back to, I guess, the greater overall mythology for a very, I guess, integral episode in X-Files lore. Very, very important. It's part one of a two-parter. Part one is Colony. We're going to get back. We're going to get away from Satan, away from the voodoo, and we're going to go back to the bread and butter of X-Files, which is aliens. And we're gonna talk about that. So we will see you next Friday.